Hi, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense on YouTube. I had a question that I received the other day, and I thought might ought to answer it. It dealt with why former President Trump does not get a jury trial in his case against the New York Attorney General. And I will be happy to explain that. Let's begin by talking about what the New York Attorney General's case is about. It is essentially a consumer fraud case, and in this case, the consumers are thought to be the banks and lending institutions that made loans to the Trump organization over a period of years. There are a number of problems with the New York Attorney General's theory, but the issue at the heart of the case is whether or not he overvalued his property in order to get loans at more favorable rates than he would have gotten if he had given the true value. So that's what that case is about, but it is not a common law fraud case. In a common law fraud case, you have to prove all 9 badges of fraud. And here are the 9 badges of fraud. You have to make a representation of fact. You have to establish that it's false. You have to establish that it is material. The representer's knowledge of falsity or ignorance of its truth has to be established. In other words, somebody has to know they're lying. They can't just be mistaken. However, total ignorance or basically willful blindness is the same thing as knowledge. The representer's intent that it be acted upon by the person in the manner reasonably contemplated. So here, assuming that the statements were fraudulent, the intent would be to get the loan because that's the manner they would reasonably contemplate acting on the information. The injured party's ignorance of its falsity, the injured party's reliance on its truth, and the injured party's right to rely on that information. And finally, consequent and proximate injury or damages. So here is the statute under which this case is being brought. It is New York Executive Law 63, paragraph 12. Whenever any person shall engage in repeated fraudulent or illegal acts, all of that. And you can tell it goes into a great deal of detail about all of the things that might be fraudulent. In connection with any such application, the Attorney General is authorized to take proof and make a determination of the relevant facts and issue subpoenas in accordance with civil practice law. So it's a very broad-ranging statute, but the key here is that it's a statute. Now, why is that important? Well, I'll get to that. Here is what the 7th Amendment to the Constitution says. In suits at common law, where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, which of course at the founding was equivalent today to, almost $500, the right of a trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law. So what's important here is the 7th Amendment right to a jury trial only exists where the action is brought at common law. Now, does that mean that if you have a statutory violation, you can't get a jury trial? You can often request a jury trial, but the state has absolutely no obligation to give you one. And by virtue of that, a statutory action is normally considered to not involve a jury, unless the statute provides for a jury. And in that situation, then you're certainly entitled to have a jury. And this is not uncommon. This is the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. It's a federal civil statute that provides a right of action for individuals who are deceived, harassed, otherwise vexed by debt collectors. And in the text of the act, it provides for civil liability. So with civil liability, and thanks FTC, but I'm not really interested in giving you feedback. It says Except as otherwise provided by this section, any debt collector who fails to comply with any provision of this subchapter with respect to any person is liable to such person in the amount equal to the sum of the actual damage and that sort of thing. And then as we go down here, in determining the amount of liability in any action under Section A of this court, the court shall consider among other relevant factors. So here we have a federal statute, and again, it empowers the court, not a jury, to render a judgment in a Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. Now, the reason we know that it is a court and not a jury, or that a jury isn't available, is because it says the court may consider instead of saying the finder of fact may consider. These are the little things that you learn in law school that help you interpret federal statutes, state statutes, that kind of thing. So by virtue of the 7th Amendment, former President Trump does not have a right to a jury trial because this is not a suit at common law. It is a statutory action brought by the New York Attorney General. And also of interest, I would point out that in Missouri, where we have a very extensive Merchandising Practices Act, which is, they call it a little FTC Act, that statute also doesn't provide for a jury trial. It provides for a determination by a court. So even though you might get a jury trial in some other suit at common law, for example, a fraud lawsuit or a contract lawsuit, in a statutory action, at least in Missouri, you are not going to get a jury because it's not a suit at common law, and the Missouri Constitution doesn't preserve the right to a jury trial, and I don't believe the New York Constitution does either. So what does all this mean? Well, essentially, President Trump, or former President Trump, is complaining because he doesn't get a jury. And I think that's because he believes, and probably to some extent it's true, he believes that he can convince a jury that he didn't do anything wrong. And in most cases, it only takes convincing one person, and at some point, the New York Attorney General is going to get tired of dragging the case through the courts. That's, I think, his strategy. But without a jury, he has to convince a judge. And I believe he thinks he has a very unfair and unfavorable judge. I'm kind of putting words in the guy's mouth, but that's what I have read on Truth Social. It's what I've read on Twitter. And a lot of the people who are his supporters and advocates have said much the same thing. But the law is the law, and it applies equally to everybody. And if the law says you get a jury trial, you get one. And if the law doesn't say you get a jury trial, you just don't get one. And as a result of that, he really does not have anything to complain about with respect to the jury issue. Now, with respect to the facts of the case, I haven't done enough of detailed digging into it to give it any consideration, because I am hopeful that at some point he will withdraw and there will be another candidate that the Republicans nominate for president in 2024. I know a lot of people love him, but I don't think he made very good decisions as to the people he put in cabinet positions during his first administration. I don't think he made I think he made a lot of statements that he shouldn't have made because they were so easily misinterpreted. And I honestly believe the guy probably tried to do his very best as president, but he had a very hostile group working against him. And as a result of that, you have to make good decisions when you are in that situation, and I don't think he did that. So, at least from my perspective, I would sure like to see somebody else run. And I'm also cheered by the fact that Robert Kennedy is running. He's an environmental lawyer. He's done a lot of good for the environment. We'll have to see where he goes in the near future. That's what I have for you on this particular issue and the issue of a jury trial. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments down below, or you can send them to me by email. I'm happy to try and engage that way. Thank you very much for watching. If you have the opportunity, go out and do something nice for somebody today, and come down here and catch me at the beach next time. If you like this video, here are a few others you might try, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a terrific day, guys.